We've talked about dreams under management, goals under management, and now it's time for humans under management. More specifically, the virtual Humans Under Management Conference happening on the 8th of September with incredible speakers from around the world. I'm thrilled to be part of this event for those seeking better client outcomes, which, as a listener of the Innovating Advice Show, I know includes you, and am impressed by how affordable this event is for advisors and planners everywhere. We're talking about the cost of a dinner. These super early bird tickets have sold out, but hop on now to grab an early bird ticket at innovatingadvice.com/HUM for Humans Under Management.
A lot of advisors don't know what a stage 4 experience looks and feels like. A lot of them think they're already doing it. They think that this thing called financial planning is it, and they just need to find some more questions. What's the killer question that I can put into this process that's going to make the difference? And that's not it. But I also think you're right. Clients have no idea what this thing is. This is experiential. A client can't tell you what it is, but they can tell you when it's different.
Welcome to episode 50 of the Innovating Advice Show. It is hard to believe it's been 50 amazing episodes already. Thank you for being part of this journey, for allowing me into your lives each week, and for all that you are doing to propel this profession forward. In this episode, I'm joined once again by Brian Foster, founder of the Financial Caddie, a global community of forward-thinking financial planners based in beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. Brian was first on the show on episode 32, where we talked through what Brian describes as the 4 stages, starting with product sales, to assets under management, progressing to financial planning, and then to the all-important stage 4, which we quickly realized was worthy of its own episode. So here it is, diving into what it means to operate at stage 4, which Brian describes as the only client-centric model of the 4 stages. Links, timestamps, and the drama triangle graphic we discussed throughout the episode at innovatingadvice.com or directly through the link below. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hey, Brian, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me back.
So we have a lot to talk about today, and we even chatted in the first episode. We quickly realized we needed a second episode. We know that we could probably have this conversation for 8 hours a day for a week straight, so there might be another conversation after this, but we had you on episode 32 when we really started focusing on stages 1 through 3 of a 4-stage journey. So can you do a quick recap for us of what stages 1, 2, and 3 are?
Yeah, so stage 1, I call a broker, and the stage 1 broker basically sells insurance products for initial commissions. Stage 2 is an investment advisor, so they've made the shift from selling insurance to selling investment products, and typically they'll be generating recurring revenue, probably under an assets under management model. Stage 3 then is the shift to a financial planner. So that involves becoming technically superb, estate planning, investment management, debt planning, financial planning, all that good stuff, becoming a CFP, adopting the 6-step financial planning process. And now we've got our own product. We're selling a financial plan. And so those are the first 3 stages.
And one of the things that was fascinating about that conversation is, thinking back to my early days in the industry and going to conferences and, especially being a young female and having a lot of older men at these conferences, it was all about let me show you how much I know and how smart I am. And I kept thinking, who are your clients? And I would never want to send anyone to you. And as you were explaining stages 1, 2, and even 3, there is a lot of that, hey, let me show you how smart I am and how much I know. And that's a lot of what overwhelms clients, right? It tends to be more about the advisor or broker or salesperson than it does about the clients. And that's the big difference in getting to stage 4.
I think it is. It's about my qualifications, my experience, my knowledge. And look, those things are super valuable. I mean,
Yeah.
that stuff is important. So I don't want to dismiss that. But I think actually in a lot of cases that can get in the way too.
Yeah, absolutely. So then let's dive in a little bit to stage 4. How would you describe that sort of at a high level?
Stage 4, I'm going to make a controversial statement because I like making controversial statements. I know, terrible. So I'm going to make the statement that stage 4 is the only client-centric model of the four stages. Now, I know lots of good financial planners that are going to hate what they've just heard, and they're going to say, how dare you say that financial planning is not client-centered? And I think we need to sort of delve into that a little bit. I sort of view stages 1 to 2 as selling.
Yep.
And I view stage 3 as consulting. And consulting is all about giving advice. And that's where what you just said about, people's knowledge, they come into the meeting, the clients come into the meeting, and I know because I've been in this position myself, clients come into the meeting and you cannot wait to dispense your knowledge, your wonderful knowledge and your wonderful experience, okay? And it usually happens. I was reading something recently that said, typically if you go to a doctor for a diagnosis, the average time to actually make a diagnosis is like 18 seconds or something.
Yeah.
And when I talk to financial planners, and I know this because I feel it still now myself, when I have that first meeting with a client, there is a real desperation to get into advice. And I think that's because we want people to understand that we're valuable. We want them to know that we're different to everybody else. And we want people to know that we're worth talking to and that we're worth paying. And I think the way that we do that is through our advice. But here's the problem. I think the advice actually typically is all about us. It's all about our justification of our knowledge. And that's why I say, I struggle with stage 3 being client-centric, because it's about me doing a financial plan for you, Kate.
Yep.
Right? It's about me dispensing my advice, maybe educating you. Maybe it's even about me telling you about your behavioral biases. Okay, so I think that's more about us than it is about the client.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that, because that was one of my challenges when I first really understood what traditional financial planning was and how it's all about, okay, I'm going to gather all of this data. And the data really is around the numbers and what's your life expectancy, how many family members do you have, and then kind of putting that data through this process to spit out all these charts and graphs and solutions. And I honestly was so confused by that, because I was like, where do you really learn about the client? And yeah, most people have, a couple of introductory meetings and get to know you meetings. But in my experience, it just isn't possible to really dive into what the client actually wants from their life. And all those conversations that the client, in the busyness of life, hasn't paused to think about until something like a, global pandemic happens and people lose their jobs and, all these life situations where you're forced to confront it. But that was one of my really big issues so I agree with you, Brian. I didn't feel like that was being client-centric. It felt very removed from the actual person that we were trying to help and just looking at the numbers in a lot of cases. And that's a big blanket statement. And, there are nuances certainly, but at a high level, that's kind of how I felt about it. And I still see a lot of people doing that. I talked with a friend recently who just left a company, and one of her challenges was this company very much was, or the owner was, I only want to do a financial plan and then I don't need to see the person again. And that to me, like, what about that is client-centric, right? You're like, I want to collect all the data. I want to spit out this document, give it to them. And that's a wrap.
Yeah, that's right. And so, in that first meeting at stage 3, in that first meeting, typically we ask the client, about their life goals. In fact, we're told in the process we need to ask the client about their life goals, and there's different ways of phrasing that, but essentially, we're asking the client to come up with the answers to the question, where are you trying to get to? And if clients struggle with that, and I think most clients do, then we're going to sort of prompt them by asking questions like, when do you want to retire? Yeah. Or where do you want your kids to go to school? And so then we end up with these goals. Maybe the client has bought into those goals and maybe they haven't. And then we go away, we do this amazing report, and it's a comprehensive financial plan. And literally in the space of 2, maybe 3 meetings at a push, we've blown the client's mind completely with all our wonderful technical knowledge and our advice. And I just don't think that's very engaging.
Yep.
So I think stage four is a completely different animal, and it requires a completely different approach. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand that or understand what that means. But it does require a completely different approach.
So let's dive into what that looks like and what it means. And let's look through, you've got this drama triangle. And so pop down to the show notes because we'll be talking about this quite a bit. The graphic will be right there. And talk us through it, because I think seeing it is important, but we're going to be talking through what it means. And you and I have gone back and forth, and you can apply this to any situation in life, really. But as we're looking at the advice process.
So I think one of the questions that I'm asking is, what is it that the clients come to us for? Okay, are they coming to us for advice? Do they want us to tell them what to do? Is that why they're coming? Or do they want to come and be given information? Is that what they want? Do they want to be saved from making mistakes? Or do they want to be free to be able to make their own decisions? Do they want to be able to take responsibility for their own decisions? So I think that's an interesting question in terms of what clients come to us for. And I'm willing to bet that the answer to that will be different for certain clients. Yeah. Some clients will want to come and they will want to be given the answer. Okay, and that's potentially fine, and we can advise them, but that's not the same as the kind of experience that we're describing. And I think the problem is that the first question that the client comes with typically isn't the real question. I know from the conversations I've had with clients, I remember one particular client who, when I asked him how I could help and what was on his mind, he said, I'm 3 years away from retirement, and I want to know where to put my money. I've got some money in the bank and I want to know where to put the money. And that was kind of his best answer to my question. And actually, that wasn't really the question. When we got down to it, the question was, have I got enough money to fly my plane until I can't pass the medical anymore? That was actually his question.
Yeah.
And so that's a completely different question. That doesn't require advice. That requires something before we get to any advice. Do you know what I mean? So let's just take that back to where you were going with the what we call the dreaded drama triangle. So let's just paint that picture for people. I think this is the sort of standard human behavioral starting point.
Yeah.
It was devised by a guy called Stephen Cartman in the 60s, and it has 3 roles. So if you draw a triangle, it has 3 roles. There's the victim, there's the rescuer, and there's the persecutor. And if you think about any fairy tale story that you ever known, there will be the damsel in distress, there will be the hero. Disney. Disney, Disney is the classic. There'll be the hero on a white horse, and there will be the villain.
Yeah.
Okay, and this thing is like the sort of human condition. And so the victim has this mentality of I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, I'm not enough, I can't get forward, there's nothing I can do, it's all a bit helpless. and the rescuer comes in to save people. This is actually where I think a lot of advisors start. So don't worry, I'm going to save you. I'll look after you. I'll make sure you're okay. I'll give you what you need. I've got the solution to all your problems. But one of the problems is that they're trying to make themselves indispensable in the process.
Yeah.
And then the persecutor typically will be either a set of circumstances. I haven't saved enough for retirement, might be a persecutor. That's what's persecuting people. Or it might be a disease. COVID-19 at the moment is a really good example. That might be regarded as the persecutor. I've lost my job as a result of COVID-19. What do I now do? I'm now playing the victim. And what happens is we spin around this triangle, playing each of these roles ourselves, probably unwittingly, and we end up stuck in this thing called the drama triangle. So it's a really pervasive thing. And if we think we're not in the drama triangle as humans, then we ought to take a quick look at one of those roles, because we're playing one of them as we say that to ourselves. And so I think this idea of advice and saving people is something that keeps us, a lot of us, in that process. So there was a statement that I saw this week that was made, that was talking about what financial planners should be doing as a result of this whole COVID-19 thing. And the statement said, clients are scared. It's our responsibility to prevent people from making mistakes.
Yeah.
And that kind of shook me, because I was thinking, well, A, what's a mistake? I know what we mean by that. We've got to stop people losing money. We've got to stop people doing dumb things. But are we playing the rescuer there and keeping the client in the victim space? And why is that our responsibility? Who says it's our responsibility? Is that what the client thinks the nature of our relationship is? Or does the client want to be empowered to be able to make their own decision? And if you're going to empower a client to make their own decision so that they're making an informed decision or an informed commitment, which I believe is what they should be doing, because they should be taking responsibility for their life, not me. It's not my life. And it's not my money. So I think if we want to empower people, which is a word that we use a lot, if we want to empower people, we can't empower them by giving them advice.
Can we not? I mean, I think you can give advice, but not everyone needs to take the advice. Like, I certainly know people, personally, who love collecting advice from different people and kind of weigh the pros and cons, and be like, all right, I've listened, and now this is what I'm choosing to do. So there can be a mix of advising and empowering, I think.
No, I think that's true. There's a time for advice, but I don't think it's definitely not in the first meeting. And I don't think the process that we follow typically allows us enough time to understand the client properly. So, we have this concept of knowing your client. Okay, and we fill in this thing called a financial needs analysis or a fact find or whatever it is. But that's not knowing your client.
No.
Well, that might be knowing your client, but it's not understanding your client. I think there's a whole bunch of other things that need to happen. So, so I could use a golf analogy here, and I could talk about a professional golfer and the caddy, right? And so if the caddy pitches up and decides to make all the decisions for the professional golfer, he's going to tell the golfer which shot to play. He's going to tell the golfer which club to use. I mean, there's just no way that's going to happen, because now who's playing the game? Whose game are we playing here? Is the player playing the game, or is the caddy playing the game? That's just never going to happen. That's not to say that the caddy's not there to give advice occasionally. And sometimes it's a really important moment when they do. But if we're going to empower the player to to shoot the best score, then we need to be playing a supporting role, and the player must make all the decisions because they must live with the consequences, not us. I don't believe we're getting paid to take responsibility for people's lives or their money. And if we are, we should be getting paid a lot more than we're getting paid at the moment. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting question. And that whole dynamic, I think, plays out in the roles that we play as financial planners and the client. And I think often what I see is when the client doesn't want to play if we're playing the rescuer, if the client doesn't want to play the victim anymore, they turn into the persecutor, and then they blame the advisor because something's gone wrong or their fees are too high or whatever it is. And instead of being the victim, they now come out and play the persecutor. And which role does the advisor then go into? They go into the victim role.
Yeah.
And then they say, my clients won't pay fees, or you don't understand how difficult this is for me. And then it's a mess.
Well, I imagine listeners are probably in the same mindset that I am right now. I have 75 different thoughts, and that's why it's clear this could be, an 8-hour-long debate. Maybe we should do an open virtual meeting and have people come in and debate it at some point, because there are so many different ways to go with this. But one of the things I want to touch on is what you said earlier about the gentleman that came and said, hey, I want to retire in a couple of years. Where do I put my money? I mean, how many times has any person who's ever called themselves a financial planner, the second that you say that, it could be somebody you're meeting at a cocktail party, it could be standing in line at the grocery store, the first thing they say is, where should I invest? Where should I put my money? Right? Like, what have we done that seems to train people that that's what the relationship is and that's what happens, right? Because that tends to be the most common thing. So as we have these conversations about changing the mindset and the approach of advisors and planners, I think somehow we also need to find a way of how do we get the message out to clients? Because that's one of the things that does need to change. I think there are millions of people out there that very much want the relationship that a stage 4 planner brings, but they don't know how to find it. And if you look, I mean, we could sit here for the next hour and find hundreds of websites of planners around the world and not actually find someone doing stage 4. I mean, how hard is it to get there? So we need to find a way to do both in parallel, because that's one of the things that's going to be increasing the demand for stage 4. I talked with someone recently who, detests his advisor, and he went in and it was very much that rescuer. Like, he went in to meet with his advisor for something specific, and the advisor was just telling him and selling him. And he said he got up and he told his advisor, like, if you don't stop talking, I'm going to fire you. And I told him, I was like, please fire your advisor. Like, we need advisor, right? There needs to be that catalyst. And that's one of those things is, what is the catalyst of moving from stage 1, 2, or 3 to stage 4? Or, can you come in and get to stage 4? But until we have the demand out there that's also showing how much this is needed, I think that's one of the, unfortunately, many sort of challenges in getting to stage 4.
I think that's right. And the difficulty is that a lot of advisors don't know what a stage 4 experience looks and feels like. A lot of them think they're already doing it. They think that this thing called financial planning is it, and they just need to find some more questions. Which, what's the killer question that I can put into this process that's going to make the difference? And that's not it. But I also think you're right. Clients have no idea what this thing is. This is experiential. A client can't tell you what it is, but they can tell you when it's different.
Yeah,
they can identify when it's different. I've just done some work with a private client, all via Zoom, because of course we've been locked down. And over the course of the last, I guess, almost 3 months, we've had 7 meetings. We haven't talked about products. We haven't talked about investments. We just haven't gone there. And it's been a really interesting experience because it's the first time I've done it completely virtually, actually.
Wow.
Normally it's face to face for me. So that has been very, very interesting. But the point, I suppose, is that the client couldn't have told anybody what it was that they were looking for on day one. They couldn't sort of point to it. and say, I want one of those.
Yep.
So this, I think, is one of the challenging things with regard to marketing financial planning. I mean, clients don't know what financial planning is. Clients are not going to know what financial coaching is either. They're not going to know what lifestyle financial planning is. So these names are just completely meaningless. So I've got this idea that actually what we should be doing for clients and planners is showing them what this experience actually looks and feels like.
Yep.
I think that's difficult because it requires a sort of a real life scenario in order to experience it. So I think that's difficult. But my experience is that when clients are experiencing this thing, they can't tell you what it is, but they know it's different, and it feels different. And it feels like it's all about them. And because it's all about them, they're far more engaged in the process. And they want to go there. And the added benefit to that is that I haven't had any problem getting clients to pay for it. And I don't think you have either. So
right.
We know it works.
So what does that look and feel like? If we go back to that drama triangle, there's, what is a flip side of it or a different triangle?
There is. It's called the empowerment dynamic. And so instead of having a victim orientation, we have a creator orientation. And so the roles are changed. So the victim becomes a creator. I have a choice. I can control my destiny. I can be empowered to make my own decisions. And then the rescuer becomes a coach. So instead of telling people what to do, the coach asks better questions. So it's actually about living in the questions, not about living in the advice. And that's fundamentally different. It's about the quality of the questions that you ask. And then the persecutor becomes a challenger. So there's a way to. So the persecutor would normally blame and judge. In a challenging role, there's no blame or judgment. So the roles change. The three roles change, and when people are living in the empowerment dynamic, then everybody is taking responsibility. And I think the whole thing changes. So that's the science, I think, behind it. But for me, it's really, it really is all about the questions that we ask. And I know we keep talking about this, but it's not like, I get advisors coming to me saying, can you give me a list of questions, better questions to ask?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good start, but there's nothing worse than an inappropriate question being delivered at the wrong time because you're just following a script. That's again all about us. It's got nothing to do with the client. It's about being genuinely curious and listening and trying to figure out what the right question is, what the right next question is at the right time. And so I think that only really comes over a long period of time and practice around listening and asking questions and getting it wrong, making mistakes, if we like. Well, are they mistakes or are they just lessons? I think they're just lessons. And that's how we develop. And so for me, it's about living in the question. And I find myself asking a lot more questions. What I noticed in this last session with these clients that I've been working with, because we recorded them, because they were all virtual, is still just how much talking I was doing, how much unnecessary talking. Yeah, look, I rate myself as somebody who's a decent listener. Okay, and I have great relationships with clients, and they say amazing things to me. And yet, when I watched the videos back, I was like, I had my head in my hands, and I was like, man, this is crazy. You're still guilty of some of these things yourself. So now I have to work harder. So it's not easy. This, and that's why I think this shift from stage 3 to stage 4 is so tough. I think it's really, it's really, really hard. This is hard, messy work that requires a lot. It requires a big commitment from any financial planner that's that's done it. And I know lots of people that have been on that journey, and I think all of them have spent a huge amount of time developing themselves. And I think it's a real challenge. I don't think it's easy at all.
No, it's not, but it's so much more rewarding once you get there. And just like anything, I mean, even on the technical side, you're going to try things that don't work, and you have to start from somewhere. So even if it is starting from that, hey, give me a list of questions, you have to practice. You can't think, hey, I don't have all the right questions. Or, I mean, even you, after all of these years, you just said, oh, I was still talking too much. I think putting that pressure on yourself of, hey, you have to do it perfectly. I mean, that's never going to happen. But if you really, truly are working towards it, you have to start from somewhere. And that gets me thinking, so I'm thinking about all these people kind of coming out of financial planning colleges and universities and these programs and being, new to the industry or profession. I still hear from a lot of them that are curious what the different paths are, what the options are. And I've been talking to quite a few lately that have just gone out and started their own businesses in their mid-20s, before kind of going down the path and having to unlearn everything. Is it possible in your mind and your experience to kind of go straight from that, hey, I've got all the technical knowledge and, degrees and certifications, to maybe starting your own business and becoming a stage 4 planner? Can you skip stages 1 to 3?
I think it depends how you try and get there. I had a conversation with somebody recently who said that they've just come out of a university environment, having done their financial planning degree, and the tutor said words to the effect of, "You're not going to make it unless you can generate 100 million rand. This is in assets under management." And so they've been through this training experience, but they're not prepared for the real world of what happens when you bump up against a client. So one of the things that I think I see a lot of at the moment, I think it's always been there, but I just seem to be more aware of it at the moment, is younger people that are coming out of university, particularly in the life office space. They get sales training, they go through that process. Maybe they do some technical training. They're told that they're going to run a business. They don't have any business experience. They don't know how to run a business, and they're probably not going to be running a business, certainly not initially. And then they get disillusioned. They get disillusioned because the experience that they think they're going to have doesn't happen, and they bump up against targets, and they bump up against all this other stuff that the industry puts in the way, and that causes a major problem. So I think it's a big problem, and I think people either get disillusioned because they're not successful, and a lot of them leave. And I think those are the people that we want to speak to.
Yeah.
Because they typically are struggling with the sales mentality then. And then the people that are successful, once they've had a few years of being successful, it's almost impossible to change them because they don't want to change. They're happy doing what they're doing. They're making lots of money. They think this is going to last forever, and away they go. And so I think it's a struggle to change. Again, you can't change those people. They've got to want to change themselves. I think it's difficult for them to go through that process. Somebody who's completely fresh, who doesn't have any baggage, who doesn't have any preconceived ideas, probably you've got a much better chance. But I think it's possible to go from even stage 1 straight to stage 4. I think it's possible, but it requires the right mindset. And I think the challenge for a lot of people is that they've got to unlearn so many things. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and it's really uncomfortable because you've got to go against everything that you think you already know. And of course, if you think you already know it, then you're stuck in the space of knowing everything. So I think it's difficult.
Well, that's why I kind of like the idea of if you can skip those, because I'm thinking not only of people coming straight out of college and university, but how many people are maybe career changers? That's a conversation we have a lot, is what people can we bring from, other industries or professions? I've seen a lot of conversations around, talking with nurses. I think there are a lot of nurses that are, going to be burned out from COVID-19 and all of the work and effort, but their heart, their mindset, their desire is absolutely to help people and do everything they can. I mean, how great would nurses be, right? So thinking about people that have all that experience and everything.
Social workers.
Yeah, exactly. Social workers. I mean, even different kinds of therapists and whatnot, it's such a powerful profession for so many different kinds of people to come into, that I would love to think that, if you're in your 30s or 40s, 50s, whatever, that you wouldn't have to come in and even go through stage 1, 2, or 3. You've already got that experience. You already know how to ask those questions and have those conversations. And yeah, you can learn the technical stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of financial advisors might be horrified to hear that, but, because we sort of, we feel so strongly about our knowledge and our experience and all this stuff. But I mean, look, the reality is there's plenty of people that can deal with product related stuff and the technical related stuff. I think it's a different role. I think it's a different role that comes from a different mindset. And not everybody can get there. So I think one of the key things is anybody listening to this who is maybe at stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3 has got to ask themselves a question about why they want to do what they are doing. Are they really doing this because they want to help clients live the best life possible with the money they have available? Is that what they really want to do? And if they do, if that's what they want, then they're going to have to accept the fact that they're going to have to unlearn a bunch of things and change the way they do things.
Yep. And for some people, the answer is going to be no. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, I know plenty of people that are, good at sort of DIY investing and everything, and they do only want a broker to execute trades. I know people that don't want to work virtually. I mean, there's going to be that market out there for whatever your model is. But I think the point that you and I want to make is that there is also a huge market out there for the clients that do want to go on this journey. And I think there are, tens of thousands of advisors and planners out there that would love to be providing this, and how fulfilling that is. And I think you mentioned it, a lot of people get disillusioned and leave, and they're disillusioned because what they wanted to do is truly make a difference in people's lives and not just be selling products or managing assets.
Yeah, and there doesn't seem to be very many places where you can actually learn to do that. So, I mean, the results that we think financial planners get are, they are fulfilled in the work that they're doing. Their clients are fulfilled in the lives that they're living and value their financial planner a lot more. And the result of that is, of course, that they're much more willing to pay whatever it is that the advisor wants to charge. So the advisor gets to earn what they need to earn, and they get to live the life that they want. I think that's a win for everybody. So I think one of the big questions is you've got to ask yourself why it is that you want to do this, and whether you're willing to commit to doing what needs to be done to get there.
So for the ones that say, yes, I'm willing to commit, what advice would you have for them? How can they go about that?
Well, I might be biased, of course, but we run the Stage 4 Accelerator program through the Financial Caddie, and so we can help people on that journey. But I think there are 3 things that I think financial planners ought to be doing. The first thing is that they've got to work on themselves. They've got to do some deep work on themselves. This is not about reading a book or going on a one-day workshop. They've actually got to get into the discomfort of dealing with themselves and embracing things like the drama triangle. I mean, just understanding and being aware of what's happening in that space changes the way that you think about what's going on in your conversations. So I think you've got to do a lot of work on yourself. The second thing is you need to find a safe container to do this, because it is going to be uncomfortable. We think it's better going on the journey as a group.
Yep.
We've got a group of 15 people that are together at the moment inside our community, and it's uncomfortable, but they're doing some amazing work, and I think they're all enjoying it. So find a safe container, in which to explore this stuff. And then let go of the industry. You've got to let go of the stuff that's been holding us back. And that means spending less time going to investment conferences where there are fund managers on the stage talking about how fantastic their investment management is. If this is the kind of work that you want to do, then you've got to spend less time there and more time sitting in front of clients having awesome conversations. So let go of the industry and old thinking.
And that's not easy. I mean, just to acknowledge that, I spent my first 8 years in the industry going to those conferences and continually baffled. And I definitely, had that thing in the back of my head pulling me in this direction. But you're right, finding the other people, it's so important. I didn't find them. It took me, a year into the business that I created to find them. I was out alone on an island, and look, it worked, but I certainly don't recommend that to anyone. But know that your people are out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Any final thoughts? How can people learn more?
Well, if people want to come and have a chat with the Financial Caddie, we'd of course be welcoming them. We have a global community. We're just going through some changes in the community at the moment. We're trying to make it very specifically for client-facing financial planners who want this experience. If anybody wants to have a chat with me, then they're welcome to do so. I'm sure we can put a link in the show notes, Kate.
Awesome. Well, Brian, I think we've got lots more to cover, so we might keep the conversation going. And this could be a year-long series here of continuing to dive into this, because you and I have even had a lot of interesting debates offline. So we might continue to bring some of those to planners, because again, none of this is easy. None of it is, just simple and straightforward. And there's so much work for all of us to be done and debates to continue to have and bring in different perspectives. So thank you for all that you're doing, for challenging me, and for helping to push the profession forward.
No, thank you, Kate. And I really think what you're doing is amazing on this podcast. And I love listening to them. So keep going.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me a thought or two. Link to my profile is right below. Stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to hearing from you.